This old pistol belonged to my dad, and I acquired it when he passed away many years ago. It holds a ton of sentimental value to me because this is the gun that he used to teach me how to shoot when I was a kid. Now, not only did he teach me how to shoot it and respect it and what its purpose is, more importantly, he taught me what not to do with it. And I used this very same pistol when I taught my two daughters how to shoot and respect and properly handle a firearm. So this has become a family heirloom. As you can see here, the old grips on here have seen better days, are cracked and coming apart. So I figured I'd set out to see if I could make some more modern grips to go on this gun that means so much to me. I wasn't 100% sure at first what I wanted the grips to look like, so I just browsed the internet for a little while and found something close to what I had in mind and just took that visual and opened up my CAD software and went to work. Now, after I finished the CAD model and moved it to Vectric to create the tool paths, I ended up making several of these grips because after the first set, after mounting it to the stock of the gun, I realized that something didn't fit just right. So I'd go back to the CAD model and make some tweaks and make another set and make some tweaks and make another set. So I ended up making this little jig to make it repeatable where I could just make as many grips as I want without changing up the machine each time. In the past, I've had a few of you guys ask me about my probing block and where I got it from. Well, I didn't buy it from anybody. I actually have used a handful of probing blocks in the past that never really suited me. I didn't like them. So one day I sat down on CAD and drew out what I wanted and sent it to one of the online machining places and had them cut it out of aluminum for me. And I think this cost me $75. And it's everything I've ever wanted. I absolutely love it. It works flawlessly. And one of the first lessons that I learned early on when making these grips is everything has to be pretty precise, because if it's not going to fit on the stock properly. So here I'm installing my surfacing bit, and I will surface the top of my little jig to make sure that it is perfectly parallel with the gantry. Now, for those of you that don't know, when you're doing a two-sided 3D carve, you need some sort of reference point when you flip the part to the opposite side so it's lined up perfectly. And a good way to do that is using dowels. And here I'm cutting dowel holes in the jig to be used when I flip the blank. And for the first cut, I'll just use double-sided tape to hold the blank down to the jig. Now, when I make my videos, I'm always trying to pass on a little wisdom to folks so they don't screw up like I do. And here's a good lesson. Make sure you load the correct tool path when you're about to make a cut. This was not good. So anyway, as I was saying, now that I've loaded the proper tool path, after I get the blank secured down onto the jig, I will surface the top of that again to make sure that it is not only parallel with the gantry, but it is the perfect thickness, which in this case was 0.7 inches. And the first thing I'll do is cut the dowel holes in the top of the blank. So when I'm finished with this side, I can insert the dowel holes, flip it over, fit those into the dowel holes of the jig, and it'll be lined up perfectly. Now, this first cut is the clearing pass for the side of the grips that fit against the stock, so the inside of the grips. So now that this first side is complete, before I flip it, I'll install the dowels in it to be used to fit into the jig to hold it perfectly in place. Now I know everybody's workflow is different, and I'm not a big fan of tabs. So I try to use double-sided tape anytime that I can. And here I'm just adding a few pieces in some strategic spots to hold the grips down when I do the final profile cut once I flip it on the other side and finish with the 3D carve. Now I found this double-sided tape that I use on Amazon. It's actually a carpet tape, and man, let me tell you, this stuff holds great. It's like Brill Cream, a little dab of do-you. You don't have to put a whole lot of tape on there, and it ain't going anywhere. So if anybody's interested, I have it down in the description of the video, an Amazon link, if you'd like to try it. And this is the clearing pass for the final 3D cut, which would be the outside of the grips. Now the amount of wood left on the perimeter each grip was only about paper thin, so this profile pass was not very aggressive at all, and just a little bit of tape that I used earlier was enough to keep it in place. And I just touched my finger to it just lightly, just in case. And one small problem I run into when making previous versions of these grips was I would sand each side separately, and I was inadvertently sanding the corners and rounding them off, and you get this seam on the back and the front of the grip. So I came up with an idea to 3D print a mount or a stock to mount each side of the grip to hold them in place and perfectly aligned, so that when I sanded them, I would not round the edges off. And when you put the grips together, it's almost what you would call, I guess, a glue line seam, and they married up very nicely. And one thing I wanted to add to the grips that I felt was an elegant touch was a stippling pattern to the grips. And I was going to use my laser engraver to engrave that into them. And if you ain't already figured it out, I'm all about jigs. So here I'm cutting out a jig with some 1/8" ply that I'll use to hold the grips in place when I engrave them. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I made several of these grips prior to making the video just to practice and try to get it as close to perfect as I could. And one of the things that I practiced extensively was burning these stippling patterns into the grips. And what you see here is a traditional diamond pattern, and these are grayscale images that I used light burn to produce tool paths. And I just could never get them perfect no matter what I tried. The other patterns that I used the same power settings and the same method, and they turned out really nice, but for some reason this diamond pattern just gave me trouble. And something else I learned, that when doing a field tool path, engraving tool path on the laser, that if I did a very light line burn around the edges of what I'm going to do the field cut on, it just made a really nice crisp edge on those field cuts, those field engravings, and you'll see that here. After the laser engraving is done, I'll just do a light pass of 220 sandpaper on it one more time before I seal it. And in all my research, I discovered True Oil was the best stuff to use on gun stocks. And with that, I watched several different methods on how to apply it. And one that I used that I thought was the way to do it at the time was to use a Q-tip and just blot a few dots of True Oil on there, and then use a piece of 600 grit sandpaper to quote-unquote wet sand it in. And maybe I wasn't doing it right, but this turned out to be the worst possible method to me, because the grip ended up looking like crap, at least in my opinion. It just didn't get a nice shine to it. Now, one step that was suggested was to use steel wool between each application of the finish, and that worked out really, really nice. And I would just scuff down the grips between each coat, and it would get it nice and smooth. So the second method that I tried was just smearing on the oil with your tips of your fingers, your bare fingers. Just rub it into the wood, massage it in, and you'll get the best finish ever. But I guess I had already ruined it with the sandpaper, because I could never get these walnut grips shiny. But I finally settled on just blotting it on a piece of cotton cloth and applying it that way. That was the best method for me. And I ended up applying probably 5 or 6 coats to each grip to get a nice shiny finish on it. And it dries fairly quick. You could work with it after 2 hours, but I found myself leaving it drying overnight, so it'd be nice and cured for when I sanded it and applied the next coat. So here's a lineup of several different grips and patterns that I tried. This is the first one. This is the black walnut, and I'm just real disappointed in it. It didn't turn out nice at all. Like I said, probably ruined it with that first sanding, but I didn't use that on the other ones. And I burned the Smith & Wesson logo in most of them, but I wanted to try something a little different on this piece of Brazilian cherry. This is a piece of Coca-Cola I had laying around, and I tried a fish scale pattern in it, and it turned out to be my favorite. It burned really, really nice, and that's what I used on most of the other grips that I made thereafter. And And just for laughs, I tried using a piece of bloodwood, and it turned out really, really nice. The only thing I don't like about it is that the border around the pattern isn't very dark after the engraving. So we're going to attempt to fix that in just a second. And lastly, I wanted to make one without any kind of pattern on the side, and I used a piece of wingay, and it too turned out to be really, really nice. And as mentioned, I wasn't happy with how light the border was on the bloodwood, so I run it through the laser just one more time with a light pass just to darken it up just a subtle bit. And then I put one more layer of true oil on it, and it turned out to be really, really nice. And I ended up making a set of grips out of just some good old-fashioned cherry, and I think it ended up being my favorite out of all of them. So there you have it, my take on making gun grips. I hope you got something out of this video. I really enjoyed doing this. Of all the projects that I've done, this was probably the most fun and intense all at the same time. But as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Take care.